think it's really important for activists, organizers, and just regular people to think about what kind of world we want to live in the future.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
All right, you're listening to the Valley Labor Report, Alabama's only union talk radio show, where we strive for news and analysis of, by, and for working class people in the South. My name is Adam Keller, and here with me is our next guest, Zac. Zac has previously appeared on the show to discuss his work with the Automotive Free Clinic in the Montgomery area. And Zac is back to update us on his projects, including the Free Clinic and some new ones he's got in the works, and for a broader conversation on the American South. So Zac, thanks for joining me on the Valley Labor Report.
Thanks for having me, Adam. Like you said, my name is Dr. Zac Hyden. I'm the executive director of the Automotive Free Clinic, which is a free and low-cost automotive repair shop in Prattville, Alabama. The way we work is we charge parts at commercial cost. We don't mark up the parts, which saves about 45%. And labor is donation-based, so you don't have to pay labor. And we keep ourselves afloat with individual grants and donations. So if you would like to make a donation to the cause, we could sure use it. Go to automotivefreeclinic.org and click on How Can I Help? The Automotive Free Clinic has been in business for over 2.5 years. We've repaired 230 or 240 cars. I don't know
That's
exactly
awesome.
How many thus far. It's really a small number of cars compared to what a production shop does. But I probably do, as a small nonprofit, I probably do 75% of the work myself. And it's about at the capacity that I could handle at this point in time. When you talk about, keeping the books, marketing, so on and so forth.
Right.
We're open 3 days a week. We're open Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. And, I think we've done pretty well. We would like to get some more money and expand our operations, but, that's for future plans. So we're also have started a network of solidarity economy organizations, which solidarity economy basically means businesses that are for the people. And that network is called the Educational and Economic Resource Organizing Network. And we have the Habitual Bee, which is an urban apiary in Charlotte, North Carolina, Popular Education Summer Camp in the Alabama Appalachians, and a Hometown Organizing Project, which is organizing a farmer's market in Camp Hill, Alabama. So we got 4 organizations in that network. I think we're about to add a farming operation in Birmingham, but that's not really in the planning stages right now. So
that's fantastic. Could you tell us the name of that again, the network?
The Educational and Economic Resource Organizing Network. And we're businesses. Some of us are some of us are nonprofits, some of us are LLCs. We're trying to start some cooperatives. It's just about businesses that are primarily about serving the people and not about making gobs and gobs of profit, though we do want to support ourselves. I mean, we're not completely selfless. We do want to support ourselves, but, we're trying to, whether it be food and agriculture or education or automotive repair, we're businesses that meet the needs of the people.
Absolutely. And one of the things we love to talk about on the show is cooperatives. And so I think that's fantastic to see that kind of network growing. And before we move on to some of your other projects, could you tell us, what motivated you to get involved with the Automotive Free Clinic and take some leadership there? And, what's been how has it felt to do this work?
Yeah. I've been a community organizer for about 20 years. I started as a student organizer at Auburn, and when I was getting my PhD at Berkeley, I was a local organizer there a bit, not as much in Berkeley as I did at Auburn. And then my dissertation research centered around urban agriculture in Birmingham, Alabama. And as a part of my dissertation research, I started Magic City Agriculture Project, which was an anti-racist and community development organization in Birmingham. And we did that for about 8 years. We started a number of different organizations. I think one of the organizations that grew out of that was Dynamite Hill Smithfield Community Land Trust. Another organization that grew out of that is Sweet Alabama. So these are still existing organizations in Birmingham. My wife ended up getting a job at Alabama Rise as the executive director in Montgomery, and I left Birmingham in 2018. I was real burnout. I was burnt to the ground. And I got out of organizing for a couple of years, and I went back into the automotive industry, and which I was an automotive technician before I went to college between the ages of 18 and 23. And got back in the automotive industry, worked at a local dealer. The pandemic hit, and I was like, man, I got all these skills, and I got all this leadership training, and so many people have invested time and money into me to get me that PhD and to teach me the things I needed to know in order to be a good leader. And I mean, you're talking, dozens, if not hundreds of people who have invested at least some time in me.
Right.
And, I felt a responsibility to them with the pandemic hitting to do something to help the community. So I got together with people that I knew, and we decided to start the Automotive Free Clinic. I love the work. I love working on cars. And I love we're a dual power organization, which means that we work on material and cultural levels. And the material levels is obviously working on cars, but we also have something to say about politics and culture in the broader world. And we have a Substack called MACHINISTS, where we talk about the American South, where we talk about economics, we talk about identity politics, we talk about just about anything you can imagine in movement politics. So we engage on two levels, the cultural and the material level, and we're launching a podcast called The Red Viper, which is sort of an evolution of our blog and social media engagements. We're launching that podcast. I think it's going to be this week, but it might be next week.
Oh, that's great. And, one of the things that I like about what y'all are doing with the Free Clinic is that dual power aspect to it. You have skills in politics and you have skills in automotive repair, and you're putting the two together. And I think that's fantastic. And I think that kind of mutual aid efforts where we're utilizing the talents and skills that we already have, but putting them in a more organized direction to sort of sync up with the broader needs of the community. I think there's a lot to be said for that, and I think we need a lot more of that. And that's part of the reason I wanted to talk to you today and kind of highlight that work you're doing. So you mentioned you have a new podcast coming out sometime this month in October. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, the podcast is called The Red Viper, and it's the subtitle is A Black Trans Woman and a Redneck Theorize the Apocalypse.
Now, that'll suck you in right there.
Yeah, and it goes to what you were saying. We sort of see that global institutions are teetering, if not collapsing, right now, and the pandemic showed us that they were not able to meet the needs of the people, and we want to highlight how those institutions are failing us with the podcast. But we also want to talk about what we can do as people on the ground to build new institutions that actually do serve the community. And with climate change and the threat of nuclear war, it's a bleak world that we live in, especially if you look at things globally. And I think it's really important for activists, organizers, and just regular people to think about what kind of world we want to live in the future, who controls it, and who provides the services that we need. And I don't think we can trust the government, and I don't think we can trust most businesses to provide those services in a way that actually meets the needs of the people. And that's kind of where the podcast is going. The first podcast, episode 0, we just talk about who we are, but episode 2, which should be out into October, 1st of November, is going to be popular education and art. So we're going to talk about how, basically how we communicate with people and what we think is important, and what we sort of are saying what we thought was important in the first podcast, but the second podcast is about our values and how we communicate with people. So that's a brief synopsis of it. It's in its early stages. The other co-host is Zora Tran, and she's a really, 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 really brilliant person who, despite only being 23 years old, has a wealth of experience in activism and organizing, and has made mistakes like I have, and learned from those mistakes even at her young age. And I really value what she has to say, and I think it's important that people like me, rednecks like me, white working class Southerners, have conversations with Black trans women, because they always try to put us on opposite sides of the fence.
Right.
And we're not on opposite sides of the fence. We want the same type of things. And Zora and I have different styles. Zora has a more heady style than I do. I have a more grounded style, but we're talking about a lot of the same things.
Well, I think that sounds really interesting. I'm looking forward to checking out the popular education discussion, because obviously that's some of what we're doing here on the Valley Labor Report, is trying to educate folks and talk to them about issues relevant to working class people, and of course specifically how to organize in workplaces and build a labor movement that can start to address those needs that you're discussing, that governments and businesses simply aren't meeting. And I agree with you. If you look at the future, it doesn't look too promising, the path that we're on right now. And so the more that we can build people power in whatever capacity we can, whether that's through unions in the workplace or through mutual aid networks in the community, I think they all have to work hand in hand.
Agreed.
Yeah. And so, I think that's one of the reasons why we want to, even though we are a labor union show, we want to continually to have these dialogues about mutual aid and about solidarity networks and just other ways that we can shift the balance of power in our communities. And the last project that I wanted to make sure I mentioned before we pivot is the Redneck Studies Fellowship. Could you tell us a little bit about that? Because the name alone is definitely intriguing.
Yeah, we got a small grant from Solve, which is a voter engagement program, to do the Redneck Studies Fellowship. And what we're going to explore is the South as an internal colony of the United States and what that means for the people of the South. We have an approach that sort of slices through the traditional stupid arguments about the Civil War. It's the war of Northern aggression, is the war over slavery. It's like, these are tired discussions, and they need to be sort of solved to begin with. And one of our arguments is that it's both. The Civil War was an intra-colonial battle between Northern colonists and the planters in the South, who were essentially colonial administrators for the Northern colonists. And that war was over the planters' competitive advantage of slavery or completely free labor. So instead of us rednecks identifying with the Confederacy, we need to see the Confederacy for what it is and what it was, which is a nation of wealthy planters who controlled labor and basically everything about the South with an iron fist, and that we should not identify with the Confederacy, but we should identify as workers. And the Civil War was not a battle that the white working class should have ever been fighting, because we had no stake in it. It was a war between, like I said, the Northern colonists, who were not the great liberators, and the Southern planters, who were essentially colonial administrators. Now, there's another interpretation of the Civil War that I think is valid and I think is parallel, and that's W.E.B. Du Bois's interpretation of the Civil War, that the Civil War was a Black proletarian revolution. So these two histories can go side by side and say, hey, people in the South, we can have solidarity around what the Civil War was about, and we don't have to identify with colonial administrators or colonists, Yankee colonists in the North.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.